Hey everybody, it's Jay. Today I'm going to be talking about my Polish collection. It's going to take a while. It took a while to get all these out. I've been putting this video off for about 3 years, and mainly because I knew it was going to take a long time to do. But today I'm going to go ahead and get it over with. And a few ground rules as well. My collection, first of all, starts pretty much at Circle 11, which is the designation given to the FB radon plant. And that helps me kind of mitigate or eliminate World War I and also a few generally fairly expensive guns like the PKM. A few of those have come in, or I should say a few semi-automatic versions of those have been made, but the few that I was able to find years ago were prohibitively expensive. And the VIS 35, as much as I like that gun, also by the time I started getting into collecting, those were about $900 or $1,000 frequently. And I'm not sure what the price is on them now. That'd be one of those guns I'd probably pick up if I run across a good deal on a particularly nice one or something along those lines, but it's a little too much for me to invest in milsurp. I'm not a big milsurp collector. But the Polish collection has started as an inadvertent collection, and really it started because I was buying military surplus era guns that were of a particular type, usually of a Russian copy or Russian design. That Polish guns typically have a good reputation for reproducing, and also at the time were quite inexpensive. So the more of those types of guns that I bought for very little money, the more I realized, hey, if I just buy this one, I'll have, this sequence of guns and so on and so forth. This video is not really about that. What this video is I'm going to very arbitrarily rank all of these guns. I haven't thought about this ahead of time very much as far as where I'm placing what, so it's going to be very off the cuff. It's also going to be highly subjective. So I'm not saying if a gun is at the bottom that I think it's a bad gun. In fact, I think all of the guns on the table behind me are good guns for the most part. There are some drawbacks certainly, and that'll factor in as well. But it's mainly going to be about my own personal shooting experience with each one, how much I like taking them out to the range and shooting them, and just my overall feeling, how much I enjoy owning it and stuff. Very subjective, very nebulous. And like I said, I'm going to try to rank these pretty off the cuff versus very pre-planned. So what may be my top, however many of these there are behind me, might flip around the next day, just kind of depending on how I feel about it. So this is entirely for entertainment, not a lot of subjective data points, or I should say objective data points, lots of subjective ones. So I think I counted 14 on the table behind me. So we're going to start at number 14. This is my Polish P64 in 9x18 Makarov. Now, what I'm going to start off by saying is I really like this gun as a practical gun. I bought a pocket holster for this, and I've carried this thing on me for many, many hours. It's extremely reliable. The recoil is controllable, and I'm decently accurate with it after I changed the trigger spring out with a lightened Wolf trigger spring. Right now, you can see I can pull the double action pretty well. The single action on these are never awful. Some are decidedly better than others. This one was pretty good out of the box. The double action, however, I had to actually grab with 2 fingers and squeeze with the factory spring to pull it. Has absolutely one of the worst triggers that I've ever personally experienced, particularly in the double action. Whenever I talked about the Nagant revolver having the worst trigger that I've ever experienced, a lot of people were quick to say the P64, and the P64 factory trigger can be extremely awful from the factory. So like I said, this one I actually, if I got a really good bear on it really fast and pulled all the way through, I could pull with one hand sometimes, but not regularly in the double action. And then the single action was okay. But that Wolf trigger spring definitely made this considerably more shootable. But the slide, as you can see here, is very low on the grip. And with me, if you're used to getting a very high pocket on a gun, and if you have fat hands like I do, or just very meaty hands, that slide will drag across. I actually bought gloves after shooting this because I decided I was going to try to see if I could carry it. I shot probably 200 rounds through it in about 30 minutes, maybe, or an hour or so. And by the time I got done, my hands were bloody here and swollen and red from that slide bite dragging across my hand. So this actually is the gun that caused me to buy gloves and keep in my range bag because it was so incredibly uncomfortable to shoot. So that's why I'm putting it at number 14. The factory trigger is terrible, and it is not very comfortable at all for me to shoot. It's pretty snappy feeling with that slide bite and with the fixed barrel direct blowback recoil of the 9x18. But that said, as far as like as a carry gun, which a lot of carry guns aren't very comfortable for me to shoot, small single stack, small frame guns, I actually like this very much as a carry gun and don't hesitate at all to carry it if I need to. In fact, my Ruger EC9S is the gun that replaced this 9x18 P64. So number 14, the P64 pistol. At number 13 is a gun that I'm not going to bother lifting off the table because it is extremely heavy. They weigh about 13 pounds. This is my Polish RPD semi-auto made by DSA. And these were pretty common and relatively inexpensive for a belt fed of around $2,100, which may seem like a lot of money, but whenever you compare it to something like the FN M249, which at the time was going for about $8,000, and which I think now are around 15 or 16 when you can find them, that was actually a pretty reasonable purchase. Plus it has Circle 11 on it, so it fits my collection, and I knew I would never end up getting a PKM. I bought this gun whenever DSA announced that they would no longer be producing them. A local gun store had it, and I felt like I needed to have it in my collection. Why is it at number 13? For one, it is extremely heavy, like I mentioned, and it's, in spite of its weight, it has a considerable recoil impulse, and that's because of this large piston moving back and forth to actuate the belt and feed. So even for 7.62 by 39, it jumps around quite a bit, even though it weighs 13 pounds. So a gun like my VZ58, which weighs 7 pounds by comparison, doesn't have nearly as much felt recoil to me as this RPD does at 13 pounds. Additionally, loading the belts is extremely time consuming, and the belts tend to be a weak point of the system. A lot of the belts that you get now, in fact, probably all of the belts at this point, are surplus, have been used and shot. A lot of them are smushed or smashed whenever you get them. Sometimes they're broken. And without a very clean belt, this system, at least in semi-auto, may not be the same in full auto, and at least this gun, and this may not be the same with all of them, will choke pretty easily. So I don't find it to be particularly reliable. It's a little bit finicky, and it recoils a lot, and it's a pain to load, and it's a pain to carry around. This is a gun that I definitely appreciate owning more, having a part of my collection and enjoying it from that standpoint more than I do actually shooting it. So at number 13, we have the DSA RPD. Up at number 12 is my Polish AKMS underfolder made by Century Arms on a Polish parts kit. I mainly have this because, again, I'm a Polish collector. Poland issued an underfolder, and also because underfolders are kind of cool to me in concept. For AKs, they are very much a classical AK feature. The only issue is I hate shooting underfolders. I do not find these to be comfortable to shoot at all. The cheek weld is, you tend to get a little bit of cheek slap. That's why I have this a little bit of paracord here to kind of help mitigate that. But in general, there is absolutely no way that I can get this in the pocket of my shoulder that is comfortable for me. So that may vary by other people. I do like how compact it is whenever you get it all nice and folded. And of course, with a magazine in it, you can fold it with a standard 30-round magazine easily and deploy it with a 30-round magazine in it already pretty easily. And it is cool looking. And that's about as much as I can say about it, because in general, it does work well. It's an AK at 7.62 by 39, but I would far rather shoot any of my other folders or fixed stocks over this. But it does work quite well. It's lighter weight than the RPD. I definitely could load up a few magazines of these. Probably next time I go out to the range, maybe even I'll bring it out. We don't have a side rail mount or anything for optics, so I just don't shoot it very often. In fact, I've probably shot it twice since I've owned it in the last 5 years. So number 12, the Polish AKMS underfolder made by Century Arms. Up next is my Polish M48 training rifle. This is meant to be a training analog for the Mosin carbine. It does look somewhat similar to a Mosin carbine, carbine being a correct pronunciation of the word carbine, as is carbine. They're both correct. And I really don't have much bad to say about this gun. Really, the only complaint that I have about it is whenever I bought it, the firing pin was broken, worn down to a nub, and I could not find a single replacement firing pin for sale. So the firing pin that's in here now is one that I actually made out of a drill bit, out of a carbon steel drill bit. I machined it down myself, actually just with a Dremel tool. I found a diagram on the internet that had the dimensions, and I ground it down to those dimensions and made a firing pin, and it's worked fine since, run 100% since. The sights are set for 100 yards, which is extremely optimistic, because even at 100 yards, I have to aim a few feet above a target to be able to hit it. But I will say, I have pretty successfully, even with iron sights and shooting 22 LR out of this, pretty consistently hit clay targets at 75 yards with this thing with the sights pushed all the way forward. So it is actually quite accurate. It is a lot of fun to shoot. Of course, it has no recoil because it's heavy as all get out. And it has a really interesting loading system that I've only seen one other time before on another single shot rifle, and fairly recently at that, where you have something of a torpedo launcher here where you load your shell in, kind of push it in and then close it. The gun cocks, and then you pull the trigger. But not a bad trigger at all. And again, with the right parts in it, it's very reliable. I just don't shoot it very often because it's a single shot 22. And I find semi-autos a lot more fun to shoot in 22 than bolt actions or single shot bolt actions at that, where there's no magazine system. So it's a little laborious to reload constantly, but it's still a lot of fun. Like I said, I don't really even have any complaints at it. I just don't shoot it very often because of that single shot aspect. So at number 11, my Polish M48 22 LR training rifle. Pretty neat little gun if you can find one and are interested in it, and it's not too expensive. And that's one of the things about these. A lot of times whenever you could find them, they were pretty inexpensive, but I also don't see them very often. They seem to be kind of uncommon. It's a neat gun. So yeah, number 11, M48 training rifle. Coming in at number 10 is a gun that I think is really cool, that comes into the country regularly, even though the importer and the original manufacturer of these has been questionable. This is my Polish PPS 43C, which is a pattern of the Soviet PPS 43, just in closed bolt semi-auto pistol form, which means that though the stock is present, it is non-functional. The little release for it and everything doesn't exist on this gun. These are a ton of fun to shoot. They're chambered in 7.62 by 25, which is just an absolute blast to shoot in more ways than one. And mine has been, in spite of the fact that it is manufactured by Pioneer Arms Corporation in Poland and was imported by IO Inc., has been 100% reliable. No issues, even with crappy rust bucket mags. I'm shooting all kinds of different ammo. It's never had a problem. But I don't like shooting it as much as number 9 because this is a pistol. It's really heavy. So if it were SBR'd, it would be a lot more shootable with this little over-folding stock here. But as it is, it's not super, it's fun to shoot, it's fun to hip fire, but it's just not as much fun as a gun with a stock, which is why we have a PPS 4352. These were built by one of Misha's normal builders on a 4352 parts kit and a I'm going to do this every time, I always stumble over this, a PPS 43C pistol. So they're basically converted to carbine by the builder using an original 4352 parts kit. This is a lot more fun to shoot, which is why it's at number 9, than the 43C, because it actually has a stock on it. Oh, sorry, that's going to sound terrible. So it is possible to shoulder and fire. Now, these guns are reasonably accurate. The recoil impulse really reminds me a lot of the Tatarev pistol because it almost has this very delayed, springy feel, and it's just very fun. It's got a punchy sound, a lot of fireball, a lot of fire blast, but is very minimal in recoil. It's just a ton of fun to shoot. So I don't shoot it super often because it's in 7.62 by 25. I don't shoot a lot of my 7.62 by 25s very often. And I'm a little bit concerned about parts breakage on it at the end of the day, because the conversion that was done, not just on the 4352, but the 43C as well, is a closed bolt hammer conversion. And I just don't really want to burn it out. So I don't shoot it a whole heck of a lot. But it has been reliable nonetheless. So number 9, the Polish PPS 4352. This is a custom gun. And at number 10, the I keep wanting to say 44, the PPS 43C pistol. Coming in at number 8, we have the Polish P83. This is chambered in 9x18 Makarov, and is a lot closer, in my opinion, to the Tatarev, the Makarov, the Russian Makarov, than the P64, which is a little bit more concurrent to the Makarov. Now, I don't shoot 9x18 a whole lot, which is really the only reason why this gun is in the position that it's in, but nevertheless, this is considerably more enjoyable to shoot to me than the P64. The trigger, double action trigger, is heavy, but way more functional from the factory. The single action is decent. This is a reliable, accurate gun. It's closer to something like a compact size, not a subcompact. So I don't shoot it a whole heck of a lot. We've got a heel release here for the magazine, decocker and safety. A really nicely designed gun. Takedown is pretty easy with this lever here. And I actually like shooting it considerably more than the P64, but I also don't like shooting it nearly as much as my Bulgarian Makarov, so I just don't shoot it that often. It's a little too heavy for carry. It's a little too bulky, really not heavy, but bulky for carry. It certainly can be carried if you're used to carrying a larger gun, but it's a little too bulky for me for carry. And again, if I'm shooting Makarov, I'm probably going to be shooting my Bulgarian Makarov than my Polish P83. So that's the only reason why it's at position 8. Coming in at number 7 is my Polish M44 carbine, much like a standard Mosin, but in carbine length instead of rifle length. And this gun has come to me in almost perfect condition, and I got a fairly good deal on it. We do have the pretty cool bayonet lug here, with a bayonet that is fixed on the gun, that is really stiff, because honestly I don't think it was used that much. This is a post-war production M44, of course chambered in 7.62 by 54R, which is a round that I just don't shoot very often. But when I do shoot 54R, I almost universally prefer shooting them, man that's stiff, out of a Mosin than out of even a semi-auto. I had a Weber 54R for a while, ended up getting rid of it because I just wasn't very satisfied with the accuracy. These are perfectly acceptable for accuracy as far as Mosins go, and I really like the M44 carbine setup, especially with that pretty cool little bayonet on there. But these are really nice. The Polish versions of these are quite nice. The trigger I find to be better than a regular Russian Mosin. Very smooth action. And as you can see on this one, really just gorgeous bluing. Really decent condition stock. I'm really proud to have this as my only M44 carbine. But nice gun, very nice shooting gun. Said fairly accurate, all things considered. Yeah, number 7, my Polish M44 Mosin carbine. Up at number 6 is my Century-made Polish M1960. This is the closest thing that I have to an original Type 3 AK-47. The reason why it is an AK-47 and not an AKM is because we do have a milled receiver and a few other differences, but this gun is extremely smooth, extremely pleasurable to shoot. because of that smoothness. The extra weight mitigates some of the recoil. This is not extremely overgassed like some Century builds can be. It's just a really nicely made gun for being a Century kit build, especially. Really, the only reason I don't shoot it all that much is because we have, again, like some of the other guns on the table here, no considerations for optics. So I'm limited to iron sights. The other thing is these are pretty uncommon now, and whenever they do pop up, they're pretty expensive. So I don't want to put a massive round count on it. And if I'm recalling correctly, the bore is non-chrome lined as well. So I just don't want to put a ton of extra wear and so forth on it. But it's a neat gun. It's definitely one that I like having, and it's definitely one that when I do take it out, I enjoy shooting. I just don't take it out as much with the weight, the 9-pound weight, as much as my other AKMs, which is why it's coming in at number 6 on this list. Coming in at number 5 is my Polish Tantal. This is the early variant, in fact, the only variant of Poland's AK-74 program in order to get an AK in 5.45 for their military. Of course, it was very short-lived because not long after that, communism fell and the Warsaw Pact dissolved, and Poland made a big push to get into NATO caliber. And that's whenever we saw another gun that will be on this list here shortly. So the only reason why this isn't further up on the list is because I have other 5.45s that have optics rails that I can shoot optics. There is no optics rail on this. I don't really want to add a gas tube mount. The wire stock is fine, but not as comfortable as some of the other stocks that I have in 5.45. So frankly, this is another one that, being a transition piece between the AKM that I'll be talking about here shortly and the Archer, or the Barrel as the military issue name, this doesn't really get much shooting time from me. That said, it is really fun to shoot. It's very solid. This one is a kit build built by Firearms, and it works really well, and it is a ton of fun to shoot. Very light recoil. Just a great gun overall. But again, a little bit limited with that lack of optics options, and I don't want to go changing out the furniture, because then to me it doesn't become a Tantal anymore. It's something else. So I have this for the collector aspect. I got a pretty good deal on it when I bought it, and it is a lot of fun to shoot, but just don't shoot as much as some of my other AK-74s, which is why it is my number 5. Up next is another custom kit build. This was built on a matching parts kit, and the thing that I really like this is I just wanted to have a stereotypical AK, classic battle-worn AK, that if I was out at the range with other people and they hadn't shot an AK or had an appreciation for retro AKs, that I would have something that looked pretty well like it's been around for as long as it has been. This has a 1968 dated trunnion, and basically one of my goals with this gun was, if the parts were already worn, then just leave them as is. In other words, we're not going to refinish any parts that don't absolutely have to be refinished, like the barrel that was in the white when it came to me, and the receiver that was in the white. Everything else I want to keep as is, like it just rolled off of the well, not just rolled off of the factory, certainly, but just came back from deployment after many, many years of use. So that is, everything on here is basically, all this wear and everything is effectively how this parts kit came to me. Everything else, like on the rivets and some of the high spots around the magwell and stuff, are spots that I purposely wore a little bit to match the rest of the kit, to match the very kind of chewed up stock and so on and so forth. This is very attractive to me. I really like the way it looks, and I like the way this gun shoots as well. It's been very reliable for me so far. AK reliable so far. And it is just a classic AK look, AKM look. Now, the reason why it isn't higher on the list, once again, we've got a lack of optics options, and I do tend to find that I shoot a lot more with optics than iron sights, because it's just a lot easier for me. I have some difficulty, especially at range, shooting with iron sights. So this is not my favorite to shoot compared to some of the others, but man, do I like this gun a whole lot. This is one of my favorite AKMs to have and to shoot, because it's just a basic kind of a beater, but well put together beater, AK, classic AK. At number 3, we have my Tatarev model TTC. This is by far my favorite Tatarev to shoot handgun. It is typical Polish quality, and I think this is kind of the one that really set off the whole Polish collection thing. Circle 11 on the top, just really nice finish, really pretty blue, still remaining a decent trigger. Single action only, no double action, as is typical of the Tatarev. Just a really good example of a TT33 pattern gun. If you have not shot Tatarev, or a Tatarev, I very highly recommend trying to get a hold of one. As of at least the last time I checked, which who knows now, they were still relatively inexpensive, depending on the country of origin, not necessarily Polish, but a lot of different countries made TT33 clones. They have a very impressive blast, like a lot of big fireball that comes out whenever you shoot it, but the recoil is very pleasant and very controllable, and the velocity on the 7.62x25 round is pretty high. The trigger, like I said, lends itself to a decent amount of accuracy, and of course these are just classic Soviet pattern. I have nothing bad to say about this, and I have no other reason to put it at number 3 other than of what it's up against in the next 2 guns that I shoot a lot more. So really just the caliber 7.62x25 is really the only reason why it is where it is. But it's also the reason why it's as high as it is, because it is a ton of fun to shoot in 7.62x25. I love this gun. Everyone who has shot it loves it and ends up buying, you know, some variant, some other country's variant of the same gun. So well worth picking up if you can find either a Polish or, like I said, another country model. Really cool, really fun to shoot. At number 2 is my WBP Fox rifle. This is made by WBP and came into me as a single stack sporter that I converted. And this is the gun that I've picked to be my go-to 7.62x39, so I have it outfitted to fit me really well. It is pretty hefty, on the heavy side, with all of these extras on it, but this is pretty much my optimal configuration for a go-to AK, and that's the reason why it is where it is. This gun has been extremely reliable, it's been relatively accurate, and again, I have it conformed to my tastes, very specifically to my tastes, and it works well. It's fun to shoot. It is just a good all-around AK. I actually would say that this is the perfect AK. Now, some people have had complaints about, you can see some of the paint wearing off. I do not care about that at all. And other than that, I have no complaints with it. So it's hard for me to criticize anything about it. Some people have mentioned the whole barrel rear tang issue with for using a barrel scope mount, because it can interfere with the stock position. That's easily corrected with a Dremel in about a minute. So there's just nothing really bad that I can say about it. We have a Polish imported AK, quality made from a company that actually gives a crap about making something that works well. And yeah, number 2 for me in my whole Polish collection is my WBP Fox. And last but certainly not least, at number 1 is my Polish Archer, imported by the notorious now IO Inc., but made by FB Radom. And this is quite notable because this is the only FB Radom made complete rifle that we've received in the US. And FB Radom is of course known for making extremely high quality rifles for the military. So this is as close as we can get in the US right now to a modern production, modern Polish service rifle. And that is why really it's at my number 1. It has been fairly accurate in 223, 556. It's not a tack driver by any means. It doesn't really have to be. And there are some things to complain about as far as cheek weld on the stock, but it is what it is. It's FB radom. It is, for all intents and purposes, like I said, as close as we can get to military issue. It is a lot of fun to shoot. They are unfortunately quite rare now and have become quite valuable, which is another reason why it is where it is. The rarity between this and the RPD is probably pretty close. My guess is the Archer is probably quite a bit more rare, but I would certainly trade the RPD for the Archer any day. So, unfortunately, tragically mismanaged by the importer, IO Inc., before they ended up folding and going out of business. They didn't do them any favors, and it's a shame because these are tremendous guns that a lot of people slept on until you couldn't get them anymore. So, this is my number one of all of my Polish collection, if you don't count the flare gun behind me, which was apparently going to be at number one because I counted it originally. The Polish Archer, imported by IO Inc., made by FB radom, also in military parlance known as the Polish barrel. So that's all of my Polish collection, all of my firearms in my Polish collection. I have a lot of other military and so forth. You saw the helmet earlier that does not fit my head very well. And lots of magazines and bayonets and so on and so forth. Basically anything that I can get that has Circle 11 on it that's Polish military is something that I seek out because quite frankly, Polish stuff is really high quality. Typically is really high quality. Now I'm going to make one exception for Pioneer Arms Corporation. The PPS 43s have been pretty good so far. Some of their AKs have not been so good. But, you know, stuff made by WBP and made by Circle 11 or FB radom has all been pretty good. And so there's a reason why I have as much as I do. And it's because, again, it started as a quality issue. The quality was really good and the prices were really relatively affordable. So I'm glad I have it. This is pretty much the only country that I've really done a deep dive in as far as collecting purposes. I'm usually otherwise pretty spread out. I don't really collect Russian. I don't really collect Bulgarian, even though I have some Bulgarian stuff. I have some Russian stuff. I don't collect Romanian. So Polish is pretty much where it has been for me, which is okay for me to be able to narrow that focus down a little bit and still buy a few things from some random countries here and there that I want and respect. So yeah, this is Jay. Hope you liked the video. Please click like if you did. Be sure to check out our backlog and subscribe to us if you haven't already. And check out the link to our Patreon page if you want to help support us. And we'll see you again soon next time.